Good morning. Canada's democracy has been under attack by authoritarian regimes. Chief among them is the People's Republic of China. And I'm joined today by leading experts on foreign interference, Sam Cooper, investigative journalist and author of Willful Blindness, 3rd edition, Dr. Charles Burton, senior fellow at Synopsis, and Michelle Junot-Katsuya, former Asia-Pacific desk chief at CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. We're here today to address a question that all Canadians have been asking. Who are the parliamentarians who have been identified in a confidential report by the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians? In their special report, paragraph 164 states that NSICOP has, quote, seen troubling intelligence that some parliamentarians are, in the words of the intelligence services, semi-witting or witting participants in the efforts of foreign states to interfere in our politics, end quote. How can Canada have an election if Canadians don't know whether the people they're voting for has their best interests at heart or if they're serving a foreign master? Nearly every opposition party leader has called for the names of the parliamentarians identified in the NSICOP report, but the Trudeau government refuses to do so. This plays directly into the hands of authoritarians. Until those names are identified, a cloud of suspicion hangs over all parliamentarians, but especially those of Chinese heritage. It's time for the government to come clean to Canadians and defend our democracy. Sam.
Thank you, MP Voung. I'm here today to highlight some of the names and entities covered in my updated book and to pose a question. Should other Canadian journalists be examining the openly available evidence surrounding these networks? Firstly, my book recounts reporting on a 2020 tape recording provided to me, where Senator Woo is heard in a 47-minute private briefing with the Canada Committee 100 Society. This group included Conservative Senator Victor O as an advisory member, along with an individual officially listed in a Chinese United Front Overseas Leaders Group. The Canada Committee 100 Society is led in Vancouver by Ding Guo, a journalist who is also an advisor to British Columbia Premier David Eby. Other journalists participating in this tape-recorded meeting with Senator Woo later supported Liberal candidate Parm Bains in 2021. Bains had told these journalists he opposed Kenny Chiu's Foreign Agent Registry Bill, describing it as an exclusionary policy. Ding Guo was also reportedly involved in the 2022 Conservative Party leadership race, alongside community leaders officially connected to Beijing's overseas influence arm, the United Front. I can provide more details later on how this should illuminate NSICOP 2024. In the taped meeting, attendees asked Senator Woo about his stance regarding United Front Work Department community group activities in Canada. These groups, according to CSIS, are central to targeting Canadian politicians for influence and election interference. Senator Woo expressed his concerns about Canada's focus on United Front groups, stating, "Whether you belong to an organization that happens to be listed as a United Front organization should not be a litmus test," and added, "I am fighting very hard against that type of litmus test." To provide the evidence of this tape-recorded meeting, which my colleague Charles Burton, a sinologist and Mandarin language expert, reviewed and analyzed for myself, I'll briefly play a transcript from this meeting.
Having said that, I'm very worried that the mainstream in Canada, including a lot of my friends and political leaders and business leaders and media leaders, are falling into a very dangerous trap where they are using what I call a litmus test to demonstrate the loyalty of Chinese Canadians in this country. We can identify, for example, your views on Hong Kong, your views on Tibet, your views on leaders, your views on South China Sea, whether you belong to an organization that is officially part of the United Front. You know, many organizations are listed as part of a United Front list of organizations, and the fact that you are simply associated with one is often used as a litmus test. And this is not a good development that I see.
Mr. Burton, the sinologist and Mandarin language expert, reviewed the full tape recording and told me, quote, Senator Woo's briefing to Canada Committee 100 Society effectively enables the legitimacy of agencies of the Chinese Communist Party in our country. This does call into question Senator Woo's intervener status in the inquiry. Senator Woo didn't comment to me about his remarks, but said I should question the Hogue Commission, who also didn't comment. Ding Guo has said there is nothing inappropriate with Canada Committee 100 Society activities. Therefore, in Willful Blindness 3rd edition update, I write, in a way, Senator Woo's intervention in the Hogue Commission seemed to fulfill his taped pledge to the United Front. He repeatedly filed submissions undermining Canadian intelligence and using Chinese intelligence talking points. My confidence that he appeared to act for Beijing was bolstered by information from a person I call Confidential Source 1, who confirmed that Senator Woo, appointed by Justin Trudeau, was under CSIS investigation. Confidential Source 2 also repeatedly stressed that Conservative Senator Victor O, an advisor to the Canada Committee 100 Society, was a significant target in CSIS's investigation into federal election interference. In Willful Blindness, I write about investigations that began in early 2019. I write, according to 3 national security sources, Liberal Cabinet Minister Mary Ng was identified in CSIS investigations as one of 11 Toronto area candidates clandestinely supported by Chinese consulate and United Front influence networks in the 2019 election. CSIS assessed that Mary Ng was unwittingly implicated in this interference network. Despite my requests, Mary Ng and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's office never responded for comment. As I write in Willful Blindness, Mary Ng was one of the key Ontario Liberal government staffers who moved to Ottawa with Trudeau, alongside more high-profile advisors like Katie Telford and Gerald Butts. 2 national security sources indicated that a specific CSIS concern was Ng's staff allegedly meeting privately with a Toronto consulate diplomat to consult on China-related issues. CSIS identified this diplomat, Zhou Wei, as a confirmed intelligence actor. According to one source, quote, we believe Zhou Wei worked with political staffers to provide information on meetings of elected officials and their whereabouts. We know staff have direction to report privately to the consulate on Mary Ng, end quote. This is a critical detail hinted at in the Hogue Commission's initial report, which, for some reason, did not disclose the involvement of Mary Ng's staff with Zhou Wei or clarify what this implies about Ng's position in Trudeau's cabinet. Thank you.
One question and one follow-up. We'll start in the room. Ryan? Good morning. Brian Passif from Toronto Sun. During the Prime Minister's testimony last month, there were allegations of foreign governments attempted to upend a Liberal candidate's campaign due to their views being contrary to the foreign government's interests. Last year, I wrote about Kevin's ill-fated campaign to run for the Liberals and his allegations that China had a hand in his ouster as a Liberal candidate. Questions for Sam. Do you believe Kevin was that candidate?
I also covered Kevin Voung's allegations of what he believed occurred. I did a lengthy videotaped interview with MP Voung on his allegations, and I looked into his case for months. I also read your report and others, and I had no idea that this new top-tier case would be tabled at the Hague Commission. When I saw the allegations that a foreign government had allegedly targeted a candidate because of their stances on that government, that type of case appeared consistent with Kevin's allegations. I can share the detail that in my own investigations, I heard from several Liberal Party of Canada sources that alleged after it became clear that Kevin Voung would be the nominee in his Toronto riding, a senior Liberal Party member allegedly started to communicate within the party, making efforts to wind back that nomination. So this is an interesting flag for me on the plausibility that MP Voung's case could be that serious case alleged in the Hague Commission. Other details that were interesting were that a news story was published alleging sexual misconduct, as you wrote, Brian, about MP Voung. He had already, he was already in place to run, so it was up to the Liberal Party and the Prime Minister to withdraw his candidacy, and that occurred. What I gathered from the Prime Minister's testimony is he said he was not aware from intelligence of the allegations. Of course, he didn't refer to what member of his party could have been targeted. But I can say that consistent with the PRC being the by far the biggest targeter of Canadian candidates, whether they be friends of China, neutral and convincible, or foes of China, it's consistent with allegations in New York in an FBI counterintelligence probe that when China's Ministry of State Security wanted to block the congressional candidacy of a U.S. an Army veteran who had come from China being a Tiananmen Square activist, the FBI says, and indictments say, China didn't want him to run, so local networks, proxies were employed by the Ministry of State Security with plots uncovered in intercepted communications, including that campaign workers be implanted in that individual's campaign to perhaps gather compromising activity. There were a part of the plot was potentially harming the candidate in ways that would preclude them from running, so physical violence. In Canada, I'm aware in my coverage of cases and networks that came up in the Hague Commission from looking into my reports, I noticed a pattern that an individual that my sources indicated China wanted out of the way or Chinese proxies wanted out of the way was the subject of news stories alleging sexual impropriety. And, that my sources indicated that this could have been part of a plot. So to sum up my answer, with everything I know and my subject matter expertise on China as the #1 threat actor targeting candidates that they see as critical to their geopolitical aims, it is plausible that Kevin could be the case. And I think the Prime Minister, I judge, would have the answer. CSIS would have the answer. The Hague Commission probably has the answer. So I think, as I sit here today, in my opinion, if Mr. Voung was harmed in that way and targeted in that way, I do think, You know, if I was him, I'd want a public explanation and a type of exoneration for a lot of things, if that's what occurred. Let me stress, I've only seen the patterns. This is part of my investigative methods to see, you know, what sources say, can it be corroborated? I do think it's plausible that his case could be that one referred to.
Brian, can I add? So I think in my mind and in my heart, what happened to me was not an accident, but by design. And I obviously reserve getting into, I think, very intricate details on the advice of my legal counsel. But on this point, I think I can say from fact that one of the individuals who are no longer sitting with the Liberal caucus was the MPP for the riding that I now represent federally. And it's important to note that this is a riding that is not only home to Toronto's Chinatown, but where 1 in 7 of my constituents, like me, are of Chinese heritage. So by association, I think one can only assume to the best of their ability, where there is smoke, there is a lot of fire. You know, there are questions that need to be answered. What precipitated his departure? What did he allegedly do, irrespective of his voting record on China? And I can tell you for a fact that I have never had Toronto's Chinese Consul General on my speed dial, but can others say the same?
We'll go now online. Yeah. People on Zoom, if you have any question right now, please use the raise hand function. There is no question. That will conclude the press conference. Thank you.
Great. Just to conclude, I think it's important to point out that if this happened in the United States, there would be a special prosecutor appointed immediately. And this government is dragging it out. Why? Reluctance is abetting. What's the point of having the law? Why are we protecting individuals who are harming our country, our democracy, our people, and our interests? And this government needs to tell us why. Because frankly, I'm fed up with having to pay the price for it. Because being a doormat is not a policy. And it's time to step up and defend our democracy. Thank you. And thank you to Sam, thank you to Charles, and thank you to Michelle. Great. All right.